Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. I hope all of you are having a wonderful day. As we get started here, we are, of course, we're going to be amped and ready to go for our guest today, joining us via phone, and that is a company called Addigy. And we're going to be discussing with them in just a moment about what they do, and all about, seems to be, Mac and IT management. So, pretty similar to a company we had a couple days ago, but this is specifically for Macs. And so, again, we'll have a lot of fun with it. So, but a few things to mention before we get started, including computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find anything and everything having to do with today's show. So be that, a link to our guest website, any articles or videos that we do, just anything and everything can be found at computeramerica.com. And while you're there, be sure to check out the contest brought to you by Logitech, a winner every single Friday. And also be sure to check out the live video portion where you can watch Computer America as well as listen to it. So again, check all of that out at our website. And also be sure to stay tuned throughout this entire hour, because later on in the program, we will, of course, be discussing the implications and, really the fallout of what is to come from the repeal of net neutrality. So, and that's certainly a lot to package, and there's a lot of, a lot of rhetoric. I've seen people say that, my life is over, and I want to first calm everyone down, say that life is not over, but it does, this will affect you, and this will affect you in certain ways. So, we'll discuss all that later on in the program. But once again, joining us via phone, and let's just go ahead and bring him on. So joining us today is none other than Jason Dettbarn. He is the CEO of a company called Addigy. So we'll talk about what they do, how they do it, and so why don't we just bring him on. So Jason, welcome on to Computer America. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having us on the show. Appreciate it.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. So let's go ahead and get started with a little bit of background for those of us who maybe have not heard of Addigy. When did you get started, and how did the idea come about?
We're about 3 years old. I came from an industry solely PC, so companies like CA, Computer Associates, and then at Kaseya, where I was at for almost 8 years, inevitably running sales operations worldwide when I left 8 years ago. During my 8-year time there. And there was two nagging things that were driving me nuts. Was these products were getting very complicated to use for IT departments and administrators, being able to really do what you need to do with it. And second was nobody was really addressing the Mac market to what I felt was necessary. So it gave me enough confidence to quit my job and start the company from the ground up. And we've been a private, self-funded organization from then. But this year we've had a lot of growth, and it's been a wild, fun ride so far. Yeah.
Very, very, very cool. Yeah, and so and that's a very brief introduction. So let's talk about maybe the kinds of people who you deal with on a day-to-day with your company. I mean, are these small, medium businesses you're dealing with, or a bunch of home users? I mean, tell us, what kind of customers purchase your products?
Yeah, we have a minimum in getting started with it, so it's mainly businesses that use us. And we have a pretty wide portfolio. If you look at IT software, we have managed service providers. These are organizations that deliver their services using our tool to be a lot more efficient at managing their clients. And then we have a pretty good set of corporate clients. And the interesting thing there is you have very large corporations that, without trying, the C-suite, the marketing department, they'll start using Macs, and they're blessed to be able to have them by IT, even though they don't have the tools to properly secure them. Once they bring our tools in place and they open it up as possible assets, usually that grows very, very quickly. not one of our clients, but IBM is a perfect example. The inventors of the PC, when they opened those assets up, when users were rotating their machines out and they were offered a Mac, almost all of them took it, and they're at 160,000 machines right now, I believe, which is a huge number, especially at an enterprise level. So we're seeing that trend quite a bit on the corporate side. So we go in usually with maybe a small number, a couple hundred or so machines that are in the corporation, and then once they have the confidence in securing them and they offer them up to the employees, then there's a pretty good adoption rate. We also have a lot in education. Harvard, many different school districts, universities use us. And the interesting area for us has been around the technology sector. So these are tech companies, software or overall tech companies that are 100% Mac, and they're growing at pretty staggering rates. And they also have really high security requirements themselves, so they really need to make sure that the IP and assets that they're working with are well secured. So that's been a very fast-growing sector for us, and the one that we're pretty proud of, because a lot of them we esteem to be the kind of quality that some of these tech companies are at. So it's humbling. But
Right.
yeah, that's
So
a good makeup of ours.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so let's talk about, because obviously you seem to come from the technical side, which is definitely great to see. But you mentioned earlier that this kind of field, it was getting more and more complicated as time went on. Get into kind of how you've avoided that, because certainly over 10 years or so, the ability to monitor, to control multiple PCs from a single terminal. I mean, it's certainly gotten more complicated, but I mean, how do you avoid kind of presenting too much too fast to people?
Yeah, I think the shift is really just in the infrastructure. I come from the on-premise world at Kaseya and at CA, and there's still a lot of companies that are, the predominant systems are still on-premise, and you lose a lot of visibility to what people are using, really if they're successful at what they're doing in those platforms. When you go to a cloud company and when you start building a cloud system and you take on the responsibilities of making sure that people are really leveraging everything that's in the tool. And one actual major thing that we did was we eliminated contracts. We felt like, look, we want people to really find value and make sure that we're staying on top of them finding value. It's not shelfware IT software. And that puts a lot of risks on us to make sure that we can watch that and deliver it. But my whole team is a lot more focused on making sure people are leveraging the high-valued aspects of our solution. So that makes you fundamentally think about the UI, think about the workflows, and optimize them so that's the outcome that you're seeing. And I think that's a very important shift. You look at the consumer market, you look at Facebook, and they're looking at daily active users. In the on-premise world, they don't care, right? They don't look at who's logged in, how long they logged in, what are they doing. They can't really pull that data together. We're very focused on that, and I think that's just a really important shift that the market's making, and customers of ours and partners should be really wanting a vendor that I guess in the future that's paying close attention to that. So I think a lot of it's that feedback loop of understanding what's being used, build better UI, not just implement buttons every month that in 2 years you have 500 new buttons that are just too complicated to use. So it's definitely a balancing act.
Right, yeah.
We're not perfect, but we keep making it better.
Yeah, and that's something that we've definitely seen with the rise of data and the fact that you can, and it's not, at least a lot of companies that we talk to, it's not about tracking every little thing your employee does. It's not about tracking every little thing a customer may do. It's about making sure that something that people want to do on a daily basis takes as few clicks as possible, takes as little time as possible. So optimization seems like you really do that. If you wouldn't mind, let's take a little step back and let's if you could define what cloud-based Mac management really is, because having all these computers switching over, that's one aspect of it. But what service do you actually provide to these companies?
Yeah, I mean, it provides. We have an infrastructure that we kind of span across Google and Amazon together that allow the Macs that are deployed to check in live over the internet. No matter where they're at in the world, they're going to check in, and we're going to be able to live run commands across them, remotely manage the machines. a good example is 2 weeks ago, almost 2 weeks ago, we had the big security exploit that came to fruition pretty quickly within the Apple community. And for anybody who's out there, this was basically being able to put in the user as root with no password and being able to get on any machine, run any task, really get all elevated credentials at any point. Now, most of our clients in our cloud environment, we were able to see how many of them might have been running this new High Sierra operating system and being able to take care of that. So we reached out to clients. We had a fix out there within an hour of finding out about it on Twitter and having our partners do that. We could only do that in a cloud infrastructure where we could put this into our cloud infrastructure that all users could leverage immediately and be able to deploy to their Macs. Most of them were already well covered because we can block that new operating system, High Sierra, which it's got some. It's really looking very good, but for most organizations, it's still a little too bleeding edge. So they blocked that from being upgraded to, and it just helps secure and safeguard the organization. But as far as a cloud company goes, we really are able to see all of our customers. A lot of security and anonymity goes into this stuff, but making sure that they're using the right areas of our software and what they're doing in the platform, because it's all in one overall platform.
Right. Now, a big part of what you do, you've mentioned a couple times there, is security. Making sure that all these computers, they are up to date with firewalls, and make sure no one's getting in there that shouldn't. Which is of course highly important. But you mentioned that root exploit that was found a couple weeks ago, patched very quickly. Glad to hear that you were on top of it as well. But what do you say to companies? Maybe they take a defeatist, or maybe not defeatist, but reactionary outcome to security when they say, oh, well, I know that this isn't going to be 100% perfect, and I'm just going to handle it the best I can on the backside. You obviously, I assume, would want to take a proactive approach. Is there any kind of conversation you have with them to really highlight the importance of having security?
Yeah, I mean, overall, on that security perspective, when we onboard clients, we work with them in a very hands-on fashion to make sure that everything is well set up to their needs. I'm literally at a client right now in New York, and we want to make sure that that they're blocking the upgrade to High Sierra. They've implemented that they are doing the patching processes, they're doing the things, and the simple low-hanging fruit. There's a utility also that Apple makes called Gatekeeper. It doesn't allow you to install software that's not signed with an Apple certificate. My whole organization, we have Gatekeeper on. I don't want my engineers installing software that might not have an Apple signature on it, and we want to make sure that they have to double check this stuff. So I think you're exactly right. There's just there's a handful of really important items that should be proactively done to help manage these Macs. And Apple, for all it's worth, they're great systems, but you don't get a lot of notification and coordination from them as a vendor of what they're doing and how they're doing it. So you have to actually be a little bit more proactive in making sure that you're managing the way you want, for all of these purposes.
Right.
So
right.
Yeah.
So a little bit ago you mentioned that when given the option, many of these companies, many of their employees jumped at the chance to pick up a Mac, and that is certainly something different, because we've seen a lot of companies out there that they feel like Windows is the lower, or the easier learning curve when it comes to people, because they assume they use it at home. But why do you think there's this adoption towards Mac, and do you think that's going to continue?
I'm not a Mac aficionado. I actually used a PC exclusively until I knew we were going to go on this track, and then I really came to adopt it. And I love the whole core of it. It's a Unix system, and it gives us amazing control over the machine because of that capability. But I can't surmise exactly why. This is an interesting market segment where you can actually look at a product. It continues to boggle me. Where my grandmother uses a Mac, and it's simple and easy for her. At the same time, a Facebook or Google engineer uses a Mac as well. And there's very few tools out there where you'll see really advanced, in-depth people using the same tool set as my grandmother and my son at school would use, right? So I think they've done that part really, really well. And that's probably why when you go onto a university campus, you see a ton of Macs everywhere. And when they go into the workforce, the hard part is that they're presented with a PC. Say, welcome, congratulations, let's get started. And they hand them a PC, and they've never used a PC before. A lot of them. So they have to make some of those shifts. So we see a pipeline over the next few years, whether we love it or not, that's going to happen. And overall, it's still been an area where you can't harm IT for deciding that they have to stay PC, especially the enterprise level, because the tools just hadn't been there on the Mac. So they know they can secure the PCs. They have confidence. They've done it for a while. Macs, they can't. And usually they're blessed in some small departments in a limited basis. But yeah, I don't quite know. It's an interesting scenario, but I think it's really the uniqueness of that product set that they're used by such polar opposites in skill sets that it's become ubiquitous.
I think that's the same reaction that we have a very adamant community here on the show for Linux, and I like to think that they think themselves in the same position where you can get very technical or you can get very easy to use. But I think you're right that Apple certainly has an eye for UI design and things like that. So can't blame you whatsoever. So let's talk about you mentioned High Sierra, macOS High Sierra. A lot of companies seem to be holding off on it, and one little flaw that's fixed an hour later probably shouldn't be enough to scare anyone away. But talk about the latest operating system and how are people kind of taking to it.
Yeah, it's actually a very aggressive operating system. You don't get a lot of the consumer level features that you might think about and want, but under the hood, it's huge differences. Main one is the file system is completely modified, right? So instead of having a tried and true HFS plus file system, which has been out for like essentially 30 years, similar like NTFS on the Windows side, they moved to this APFS file system. This is what they're running on iPhones and all other iOS-based devices. So it's been put out there in the market, but that's been in very controlled devices where they know the state of those things when they made those. So during the beta cycles, it was a rough period. And that's why we actually put out a lot of notifications to our users, our clients, to block High Sierra, because it has great stuff in it, but when you upgrade it, it's going to restart your system, reformat the entire file system over the next hour, 2 hours, and then boot into the OS. And you don't have a fallback method. You can't go back to Sierra because Sierra doesn't support. So you can't go into restore mode and put that machine back to that Sierra state because it doesn't support the file system at that point. So we've bricked about a dozen devices in our environment during beta cycles, and that is beta. It's expected.
Right.
But it's definitely one area where you gotta take a moment about it. But it's got some amazing underlying features. It's a lot faster for SSD-based systems. So if you have your hard drive changed out from an old spinning hard drive to an SSD drive, much faster, better power consumption, and moving files around and deleting them are instantaneous. But the biggest one is there's snapshotting built into it, and that's the one that I am so excited about for 2018.
Snapshotting. And I'm sorry, could you just define snapshotting and kind of what that means?
Yeah. So when VMware came on the scene, I admit I was wrapping my head around the idea of virtualizing servers and is that going to be faster or anything. But the one of the main components that you get out of that is that ability to snapshot a server, make changes to it. Hey, this didn't go so well for whatever reason, or it's even taking too long. Let's just revert it back to where it was at before. And I can't really fathom making server level changes anymore without having that backstop, without being able to take snapshots and revert them back. We now have this in a workstation world, and that's what's been so scary about workstations in general. Is you push a change out, you're fundamentally living with that change. You can go to a backup or restore, but you're really not doing that unless it's really catastrophic. So now they automatically snapshot the machine before a patch is applied to it, and you can use it in some relative ways with Time Machine, where you can reboot the machine in recovery mode and go to Time Machine, revert that machine back. But Addigy is really excited because we will hopefully soon have the ability in production to make a change that we want, push out software, apply a patch, whatever it might be, take an underlying snapshot before we do it, and if it doesn't go so well, we can hit the big red button and flip those 1,000 machines back to the same place it was at a few minutes ago. Or if a user had a problem with a machine and we don't really understand what they're telling us the problem really is, was the machine working 10 minutes ago? Let's put it back to that state. That's a pretty big paradigm shift for the entire workstation community on IT, and we're really excited to be able to leverage it because it gives us so much capability. So that's
Right.
the big thing for High Sierra for me.
Right. Yeah. It seems seems very robust, and I can see where that would definitely come in handy with a business scenario, which is exciting because honestly, again, until this conversation, I never really considered large enterprises using Mac. So it seems like they really put some effort into that. Let's talk about your service, and folks, again, if you want to check out the services that they do, Addigy, ADDIGY.com. We have a link to it at Computer America. But let's say that someone from IT uses your service. What can they do? Do they talk to you and you have to do all the managing over on your side? Is that how companies operate, or do you provide tools that
Yeah, it's a great question.
or individual IT departments would use for themselves?
Yeah, IT departments use them for themselves. We don't provide any direct
Okay.
services ourselves. But what they do is, they can sign up for a free trial with our account, and during that process, we try to just wow them. When the first few minutes, they can do 80% of what they really want to accomplish in our platform. So what they do is download a little software application. This agent gets installed on the Mac, and then it checks in, and we collect all the information about the system, start alerting them of any problems, send them the first asset report. They can remotely manage the machine under the hood without affecting the end user. So they can one button click, get under the hood, check the bandwidth of the computer, the internet bandwidth, check for any available updates, deploy software to it, reset the user's passwords and accounts. They can ask for permission and see the user's screen, but not actually take over their console, which is that part really helps us in the education market quite a bit too, because when they're going in and working on a machine, they're either having to tell the teacher to go do something else, or the students are not a part of the class and falling behind. They can work under the hood on the machine live, no matter where it's at in the world on the internet, and start to fix the machine. They can inevitably take over the machine with a remote control if they need to, but they can, and all those are part of our main stack. The most important features, though, is our policies, where we can set policies for updating the OS, updating Office, pushing out software applications, or even doing a full OS upgrade of the machine, and even monitor the machine and remediate problems automatically when those issues occur, and that's all part of the entire stack. So it's all turnkey once you turn on the platform from a trial perspective.
So, and we're not really fans here of surveillance as we know it, where someone surreptitiously does it. But if these are business computers, then it is what it is. But is there any way to kind of know that someone's taking control of your computer, or someone is on the other end, watching you manage your files or things like that? Or what are the visibility for the user side?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of controls in there that the organization has to determine. We'll prompt the end user for permission to see their screen, prompt them to do a remote control session and take over the machine itself. You can chat with the user and coordinate that stuff before you prompt them anyway. But then we have the ability to turn those things off. We have the ability to do software metering and understand how they're using their software. And web services, that can be shut off also because of privacy, kind of like what you mentioned. But it's really interesting even in a school perspective. I was really surprised when we started monitoring schools that they don't really use much in standalone software on the machine, unless it's a video editing class or something. They're using all web services. So you'll go in on a Wednesday and you'll see a classroom that's only using code.org on Wednesday, and then a lot of translate.google the next day. And you're really able to understand how they're using their assets over time, and that's a pretty big difference and distinction. Also, businesses spend a lot of money on both persistent software on the machine, Adobe licensing, Office, etc., and also web services. If people aren't using that software, they should really know about it and be able to efficiently manage costs. It gets very expensive with Salesforce licenses, Office, like we mentioned, Creative Cloud licenses, so we can see those too. But we have to be able to shut those things off for our own purposes for security. We don't want to have that data at all if it's something the organization doesn't want, and we want the organizations to be able to manage that better. So there's a lot of controls around that. Absolutely.
Perfect. So yeah, it sounds like just what you want. So let's talk about a bit about the future. You mentioned that you're seeing this growth in Macs and interested in the corporate world, but 2018 and beyond, I mean, Apple, I think they already own, most of our hands with our phones. They certainly have built a wonderful ecosystem that does work very seamlessly from one to the next. How do you see this progressing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the iPads are slowly becoming much more business-oriented tool sets. Macs themselves have a lot of power, but at some point, certain users will maybe want to adopt an iPad for most of their work compared to a Mac. So it's definitely a lot easier with iPads because you have things that are a lot more controlled. But we're seeing kind of a convergence, which is weird, where they're trying to contain areas of the operating system on a Mac that can be a little bit more exposed and are messy, shall I say, and then iPads where they have to, for the first time ever recently, being able to browse through your files with an Explorer type of utility and actually manage files on your iPad, right? So you're seeing this slow convergence overall, and depending on where people go with it, but they've had 25% year-over-year growth since last year. So the Mac product line is growing at a very fast rate, and we expect the overall market, whether it be iPads or Macs, to continue that growth. But yeah, I mean, it remains to be seen. I think we could have all judged at the fact that PCs in general were going to be going away sooner, with more of an iPad type of implementation or a system in the cloud that you're managing through the iPad. But I think people we're probably the ones who are the hardest to change, the end users, from that mouse and that keyboard and the certain areas of experience that we're used to, and restricting those things that become so challenging and difficult. So we'll have to see how that market shift plays out. But the Mac market is growing quite a bit, and I think the last piece I'll make, not to go too far into this piece,
sure,
but since we're seeing a lot of the enterprise growth, and we're not necessarily focused on enterprises themselves. We're focused on mid-market businesses that are maybe not we're not going to manage a 100,000 Mac node client like IBM. It's not part of our we're not there yet.
Right.
But that mid-market sector is perfect for us, and that's what we're seeing a lot of growth. Once enterprises say, yeah, we're accepting them, I think a lot of mid-market businesses are definitely following suit with it. Yeah.
Right. Very well said. And I think we have to kind of leave it there. But I think you've certainly have raised a bit of awareness, if nothing else, about the fact that Macs, we here on the show, we do take a lot of pot shots at Apple with their computer division, because compared to their others, they seem to, really just kind of as an afterthought, oh, here's another iMac Pro with a little bit better CPU in it. But it's nice to see that people are definitely interested in the platform, and hey, this sounds great. So one last time, if people want to find out more information, if they want to get in contact with you, where can they go?
Go to addigy.com, addigy.com, and from there you can definitely call us, send us a quick message if you want more information, or I would really urge you, if you have even 10 minutes, to start a trial account. Be amazed what you can do with our platform in just 10 minutes. And see if it makes sense for you from there. Thank you for the time.
All right, our pleasure, our pleasure. So, and everyone, Jason Dettbarn, he is the CEO of Addigy. And Jason, thank you so much. Have fun in New York, and looking forward to it. Looking forward to talking with you again. All right, bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
All right, everyone, so there he goes. And folks, again, computeramerica.com, link directly to the website right there in the show notes underneath today's show. So when we come back, everyone, we'll be doing computer and technology news brought to you by Fire Dragon Security. And yeah, we'll talk about FCC and why the repeal is not the end of the world, even if it feels like it. Everyone, we'll be right back.
We are all Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, a group of locals banded together to create positive change. We took animals into our homes, held adoption events at local retailers, and talked to the community about our mission to help build a no-kill Asheville. A decade later, we have achieved so many victories for animals in need. There's been so much progress, yet there's still so much to do. As part of our year-long celebration, we encourage you to become a member of our special Compassionate Circle program. With a monthly donation of $10 or more, you will have behind-the-scenes access to the work we are doing at Brother Wolf. Our goal is to reach 1,000 members because we receive no government funding. Working together, we can help build and sustain no-kill communities. Learn more at compassionatecircle.bwar.org. We are a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.
And welcome back to the Computer America Show. It is 31 minutes past the hour as we continue on here. And folks, if you missed any part of today's show, you can check it out in podcast form, heard around the internet, wherever podcasts are heard. And it's just the entire show in podcast form, and highly encourage you to go listen if you missed our interview with Addigy just now. But in the meantime, we have half an hour, plenty of time to talk about the repeal of net neutrality and all that good stuff. So everyone, once again, computer and technology news brought to you by Fire Dragon Security. Here we go. So, folks, let's take a minute, take a deep breath, and realize that this was what we were expecting. This was what a lot of people, even though they had hoped that a massive effort on the side of consumers, be it, the millions of emails and comments submitted to the FCC and their website, despite hundreds of thousands of phone calls to individual senators, despite protests happening around the country, well, it really didn't make much of a difference, because when it came down to it, the rules for Title II, and that was what we were trying to defend today, the rules for Title II were only dependent on 5 individuals, and you only needed 3 of those to say yes, and then it was repealed. So, not saying that everyone's voice was useless. No, in fact, it's great that there was such an outpouring of support for keeping net neutrality. It's definitely going to be a good thing, because looking into the future, what happens now, that's going to make a difference. Because with such overwhelming public approval for keeping this, and the fact that it was repealed, that's when you get into a situation where this is going to be challenged in the courts. I would be surprised that if the ACLU or other organizations haven't already filed suit to overturn this decision. And this does not mean net neutrality is dead. It just means that net neutrality is not the law. There are ways to get it back, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But what this means is that the fight is now on the back foot, because at first we were protecting, and now we are fighting for. We're back at square one like we were back in 2015. Now, if you didn't get a chance to watch the actual vote that had happened just this morning, it just happened a couple hours ago, well, here's what happened. The chairman of the FCC, Ajit Pai, I saw his remarks on it, and every one of the 5 individuals had their own things to say. And essentially, those who voted to repeal it, they were basing their decision on some kind of abject, or at least inherent flaws in the understanding of the internet. And I actually recall at one point, Ajit Pai himself said that the internet is not a series of tubes. It is not like water. It is not like electricity. And when you hear something like that, it's a little disconcerting because that is the exact analogy we've been using for years, where it is a utility, and he was, claiming that, these are not, they're not good similes, therefore you shouldn't regulate it like utility, when at the same time, we depend on certain things of our utilities that we depend on for the internet. And when it comes to cable providers and internet providers, we rely on them to provide the infrastructure, just like water or electricity or any of these, whether they be privatized or in the public's, run by the local government. We depend on the infrastructure to be maintained and sufficient for whatever it may be, regardless of what you're using it for, regardless if you are running water for a dishwasher, for a shower, or a garden hose. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And for a GPod to sit up there and say that these kinds of rules should not be enforced because they are not analogous, and then turns out they absolutely are, just reeked. There was a lot of misinformation. There was a lot of lying with these votes, and at the same time, it just goes to show that it didn't really matter. So anyways, the vote happened. I keep backtracking because it does kind of tick me off. But going forward, what can you do? Well, this move is going to be challenged in the courts for the near future. So it's probably going to work its way all the way up to the Supreme Court. I really don't have much doubt about that. But the legality of this is going to be batted back and forth for a while. So I don't feel internet companies are going to want to implement rules that just in a little while could be null and void, and they have to go back on all of their practices. That probably won't happen. So the immediate impact is going to be pretty minimal. But over the next couple of years, you could start to see what people have been dreading, which was paid prioritization, which is certainly coming. Do not mince words about that. But paid prioritization certainly coming if this is not, put back into place. And you can definitely start to see more, because they're always going to want to spin it in positive light. They're always going to want to spin it in a good thing for the consumer. So don't be surprised if you start to see internet packages or companies such as, I think it was T-Mobile Binge On, I believe. Think that. And essentially it was a service that didn't let you watch Netflix or YouTube or whatever, and it wouldn't count against your data. Well, expect more of those kinds of practices where a company, be it Verizon, Charter, or whatever, they're going to start offering you better deals, or so they claim, on things that you already enjoy for a quote-unquote lower price or just better usability. They're going to start saying that, hey, we are going to optimize your video, when at the same time, before net neutrality, your video was already optimized. It just was optimized with everything else. So expect more of that. And yeah, hey, you can expect some of these practices to start to trickle through, but hopefully for the immediate future, nothing will happen because, again, this will be a court and legal issue. But what else you can do includes, of course, calling your senators and calling your congressmen. If you have any strong opinion one way or another about this move, well, there are checks and balances in place that can overturn this. The FCC does not answer to no one. It answers to Congress, and it answers to the Senate. And yeah, there's a way to overturn this and make it go back. You just need enough people to want this. So all that public outrage that we saw, all those millions of comments and thousands of phone calls, those are still necessary, and hey, you can still come out on top. So with that being said, we're going to have a pretty extensive article coming out about this and what this could possibly mean for the future and what we can do to change this. But suffice to say that net neutrality, it has been repealed. I have seen people speak in hyperbole where, at least I hope it's hyperbole, where they said that their life is over. They said that this is the day that they, go about revolution in the streets. And, it's not good if you're a consumer, but the impacts of it are not going to be immediate and they're not going to be that extreme. So the main thing I wanted to get across here was that no one should be, well, I mean, hey, if you want to be politically active, you do your thing, but no one should be worrying that their life is over because of this. No one should be worrying that the internet as we know it is now officially dead because of this one vote. No, it just means you have to double down and you have to voice your opinion louder if you so choose to voice it in that way. So that's the main thing I want to get at, folks. I hope that you agree with me. I hope that you understand that this is not the end of the internet, but rather just another part of defending it and shaping it to the way that consumers would really like. So there you have it. And yeah, again, we'll have an article about this. You can check it out, computeramerica.com. We should have that up in a day or two. All right. So with that being said, net neutrality, again, we could spend a lot of time talking about this. But in the meantime, we're just going to go ahead and talk about some of these other stories concerning computer and technology news. So let's go ahead and go over to what would on any other day be a highly dominant story. Because we love talking about acquisitions. We love talking about situations where one company spends way too much money on the, for certain properties or things like that. And we had one today where Disney buys Fox's studios and cable TV channels for $52 billion. Billion with a B, $52 billion. It is crazy how much money they spent. But when you understand what this could mean for, well, as a moviegoer, you're going to get a bit excited too. So after weeks of rumors and, the deal is done, Disney will buy up large chunks of Fox media empire for $52 billion. If you're wondering where all those movie sales go to, yeah, apparently it's to buy more movies. Saying that the list of what it won't take is shorter, where the Fox News cable channel, broadcast networks, Fox Sports, which are expected to spin off as their own businesses. So essentially anything that isn't strictly about movies or other, TV shows. So you got, again, the Fox News cable, so Fox News, their broadcasting network, and the sports channel, all of those are going to be their own business, and Fox's IP and TV shows, well, those are now property of Disney. So Disney now owns, check this out, X-Men, Avatar, Alien, and The Simpsons. Those are just some, and there's tons of them, including the majority of control of Hulu, FX cable networks, and $13.7 billion in debt. Hey, you got to buy that debt. So on top of that, Fox is attempting to acquire the parts of UK Sky that it doesn't already own, and if that's successful, then Disney will get it too. So Disney is also going to own Sky Network, which is huge over in the UK. So, while possible implications for the Marvel Cinematic Universe will come to any comic book fan's minds first, which include Deadpool and the Fantastic Four are included, not to mention distribution for Star Wars episodes 1 through 6. So, again, that point's so cool that it really needs to be reiterated. If you're a fan of Deadpool, Fantastic Four, X-Men, little known fact, they actually exist within the same Marvel universe as Spider-Man, as the Avengers, as all of those characters. They exist. So it may not be too far-fetched to think that in a couple of years you may be seeing a movie where, you know, Iron Man meets with Mr. Fantastic of Fantastic Four. You know, it's certainly a possibility. Or where, I don't know, maybe Wolverine fights alongside Spider-Man and the Hulk. You know, all these things are now possible because they are creatively owned by the same company. So they said that as cord cutting has increased and subscribers have shifted away from mainstays like ESPN, Disney is bulking up and preparing to launch its own streaming service in 2019. And with this acquisition of Fox and all of their IP, it would be, at least it would not be surprising if, I know that people are getting a little burnt out on yet another streaming service, but if Disney were to launch their own with all of these under their umbrella, it might be the biggest streaming service going. Despite what Netflix is trying to do, but when you're fighting this much content and this much money that Disney is throwing around, it's going to be hard to say that Disney is not going to be the new leader as soon as they enter the market. So, the article wraps up saying that as Disney moves into its BAMTech-powered internet video future, the plan is apparently to own as much content as possible. You can definitely see that. What's unclear is whether regulators will allow this deal to proceed, even though Comcast has already acquired NBC Universal. AT&T's proposed acquisition of Time Warner is undergoing intense scrutiny, and this pairing will likely get a similar response. I mean, as far as content goes, Disney is going to own a lot. There's no question about that. But they're going to own a lot of stuff that is related inherently. You know, when you look at the source material, a lot of the movie, content that they're getting, it is related to one another. And when you look at the television stuff, well, yeah, it's kind of hard to, dispute that between Disney and Fox, they own a large amount of the viewership out there that is cable television. But I don't know, this one just seems like a combining of two very similar franchises instead of, one overtaking a completely different segment of the market and creating some kind of monopoly. Although, again, if it does go under review and it does get shot down, then hey, it is what it is. But it's pretty exciting. It's pretty exciting as a movie watcher, moviegoer, that, hey, all this is going to be owned by the same company. There you have it. So let's see. So that article's done. Again, that one was from Engadget, Mr. Richard Lawler. And why don't we go from Engadget to Engadget, where we have this article. And this is one that, you assume sometimes that this happens and you don't have to like it, but you assume at some level it happens, but then to see proof that it actually is, it's hard to see. So let's see. Let's go ahead and all right. So let's go ahead and move over to this article. So again, this one from Engadget, and China accused of unjustifiable DNA sample collection, where blood, fingerprints, and iris scans have been taken from residents in Xinjiang, where China has been quietly collecting biometric data from millions of people in Xinjiang. And according to a new report from the Human Rights Watch, where since February, authorities have been gathering DNA samples, fingerprints, and eye scans of those in the region, which apart from Tibet is the only region where ethnic Han Chinese are not the majority, and that the government imposes tighter surveillance controls here than anywhere else in the country. So obviously, they see them as a possible threat, I'd assume, if you have to collect that much data. So anyways, according to the government, the data taken from everyone between 12 and 65. A lot of people will be linked to household registration cards, which already limits resident access to healthcare, housing, and education. And that the government document states that regulating the management of identification cards is the foundation for creating a basic population database based on one's ID numbers for the autonomous region. Oh my God. So I feel like if this happened in the US, this would be one of the biggest scandals you could possibly have. If you went to a rural, less regulated part of the country and decided to, monitor every single person, give them a card, give them a number, scan their finger, scan their blood, scan their iris, so that they have no way to dispute that they are who they are, and then you can systematically, they said themselves that this is the basis for healthcare, housing, and education. Now that you can systematically discriminate against these people regardless of what they do or where they go. But the Human Rights Watch claims compulsory biodata collection has particular abusive potential, and hardly seems justifiable as a security measure, where according to Sophie Richardson, China director for the Human Rights Watch, Chinese authorities seem to think that they can achieve social stability by placing people under a microscope. But these abusive programs are more likely to deepen hostility toward the government. As in, if you've watched any post-apocalyptic sci-fi movie, authoritative governments, it rarely ends up well for them. But hey, China's going for it. But as the article mentions, China has pushed biometric data collection for years, where this isn't the first country to implement such a scheme. And in fact, in 2009, India set up a voluntary scheme, which was billed as a way to streamline benefit payments and reduce fraud, but in recent times has become mandatory for carrying out basic financial business, such as opening bank accounts and even making payments over a certain amount. So, critics of the scheme say that the Indian one gives the government unacceptable powers of surveillance, and following several data breaches, also puts citizens' privacy at risk. And, however, a landmark judgment earlier this year ruled that the Indian citizens have a fundamental right to privacy, where it's very unlikely that authorities in China, with a zero-tolerance approach to anything could upset government control, would pass the same judgment. So, again, I feel like if this happened in America, this would be one of the biggest stories of the year, where you take a mostly independent and autonomous region and you essentially tag every single one of them between the ages of 12 and 65 by their fingerprint, by their blood, by their iris scan, and so you can control them, so you can monitor them from day to day. Human Rights Watch doing good work and obviously pointing this out. So I say that, but then we have another story here where this is going to be, a bit silly. But here we go. So this is going to be a story from, SCMP, or South China Morning Post. Okay, so I'm not going to try to, not going to try to hide this in any way, but let's say this, that Chinese woman offered a refund after facial recognition allows colleague to unlock the iPhone 10. So, this is more on Apple than it is on anyone of the Asian race. But a woman in eastern Chinese city has been offered a second refund after faulty facial recognition software on 2 iPhone 10s handsets allowed her colleague to unlock them. Where the woman, who only wanted to be identified as Yan, told told a broadcasting corporation that despite activating and configuring each phone's facial recognition software, her work colleague was able to get into both devices in every attempt. And that Jan said that the first time it happened, she called Apple, but the staff would not believe her. Where she then went with her colleague to the nearest Apple store, where her colleague used facial recognition on the phone to demonstrate the issue to the staff, and the store said that the camera might be faulty and gave her a refund, but the new phone did the exact same thing, and she was issued another refund, and no details were given about whether the woman decided to purchase a third iPhone X. So here's what I mentioned to someone else when I was mentioning the story, where this is quite possibly a problem when it comes to the fact that phones and technology and software are developed usually in a central place. And I'm not entirely sure where Apple has their research department. It might be in Ireland because, as you know, Apple has a pretty big Irish presence. It might be in the United States, in Cupertino. But part of me wants to truly believe that Apple has their research and development division somewhere that has a lot of white people. There's no other way to say it. It just has a lot of people of European origin. And I'm sure that the iPhone X, we have yet to hear a report about this happening with someone who maybe Caucasian or of any other ethnicity. But the fact that this happens there, maybe the certain facial features that Apple uses, and I think they use something like 40 or 50 different individual points of data on a person's face to identify if, hey, you are who you say you are. Well, if those data points just aren't good indicators of differences in people who are Asian, then there you go. There's your problem. I think of it like the same situation with Bixby and from Samsung phones, where Bixby works very well if you are Korean. Bixby works very well if you're Japanese. But if you happen to be speaking English without a certain dialect, then it just doesn't work that well. The software may be developed somewhere other than China. It may be assembled in China, but that doesn't mean that the software was actually truly developed and implemented for people with this facial structure. Does not mean that it's impossible. I want to make that very clear. It does not mean it is impossible to tell the difference between two people who happen to be Asian. Instead, it just means that more development needs to happen on Apple's side. But hey, seems like a fun experiment. Grab your next closest friend who looks kind of sort of like you, and hey, give it a shot. See if you can trick Apple and Apple's new facial recognition software. So folks, we are just flat out of time. I want to once again mention thank you to Addigy. They were our guests for today's show. They took up the whole first hour. Very cool interview. You can check them out. You can check out the interview wherever podcasts are heard. Check that out. Also, for today's show, I wanted to make clear that the FCC did repeal net neutrality. But this is not the end of the world, and this is not the end of the fight for net neutrality. So don't get depressed, don't get sad. You can get, well, hey, no other way to put it. You can get political. You can get fired up, and if this is something that you truly do care about, check it out, keep an eye out, and keep working on it. Keep trying to affect that change. So everyone, until tomorrow, and tomorrow on the program, if I'm not mistaken, we have a company called Bay Tech Games, where we're going to be talking all about video games, startup company, and, well, how the company has been faring. So everyone, tune in tomorrow, Computer America, and more. Stay tuned. 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern. Have a good one, everyone. Bye-bye.